I love your business, but we're going to change this, and you're like, what? And it can be really difficult. I basically talk to entrepreneurs who have recently sold their company, and I ask them, what do you wish you'd known? What do you, if you had a do-over, what would you do differently?
Welcome back to another episode of the Dan Lok Show. I am super excited. I am bringing a good friend of mine, someone I have actually been on his show before, but I'm bringing him on to come on to Dan Lok Show. We're going to talk about how to sell your business. Now, I think there are a lot of books and programs and materials out there for entrepreneurs on how to start a business, even some books on how to scale your business. But very good books are written on the topic of how to exit. When in most cases, most entrepreneurs, they become incredibly wealthy, not starting the business, not even scaling the business, but it's when they have their big payday. So John, welcome to the show. I'm excited. By the way, congrats on the new book, The Art of Selling Your Business.
Oh, that's very kind, Dan. Good to be with you again.
Yes. Now, I think a lot of people know that your work, I think the most well-known book is Built to Sell. That would be the mega best-selling book that has impacted a lot of entrepreneurs. And just before the show, I was telling John that many years ago, I read the book E-Myth by Michael Gerber, which is awesome. Work on your business, not just in your business. But Built to Sell gave me the steps, like exactly what to do, right? So COVID-19, I want to know, like John, you work with so many entrepreneurs. Where do you see how COVID impacts businesses and entrepreneurs who want to exit and who want to sell?
Well, if anything, it's accelerated their appetite to sell, because this is the third, I think, in a series of major shocks, right? So you had 9/11 for those who were in business back then. Then you had the Great Recession, the financial crisis, which was another huge shock to the system. And now you've got COVID. And I think in my conversations with entrepreneurs, a lot of them are saying like, I'm out. I'm going to restabilize my company. I'm going to work through the problems. I'm going to relaunch. And as soon as it's ready to go to market, I want to get my first rung on the foot of the ladder. As entrepreneurs, we're building wealth inside of our companies, but many of us don't feel like we're on that first rung yet because all the money is sort of locked in the company, right?
Correct.
And yet, I think a lot of people crave that feeling of security, financial security. That's like, no matter what happens, I've got that. I've kind of monetized that, and now I can go do some other things. I feel free to do that. So I think COVID is, if anything, sort of accelerated folks' plans to kind of get their business ready to go to market.
Yes. And we've been looking at since COVID-19, like a series of companies to acquire. I'm looking more in the SaaS companies, right? Software companies. And I just find that they are much more willing to talk. Like John, he's usually the typical reply. Well, we're not thinking of selling, but when would you like to set up a time to talk?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the old playing hard to get.
Yes.
Sure. And look, I think you're absolutely right. We're going to see a lot of businesses that are distressed that will be looking for a quick exit, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not going to generate the best offer. You're not going to get the most money. But for some people, they're just so burnt out that they will take a lesser offer. Most businesses, Dan, from your work, they're valued based on trailing 12 months, right, of revenue or income or EBITDA or SD, so TTM. And of course, everybody's TTM now has COVID sort of impacted. And almost every business has been impacted in some way. Clearly, service companies have been devastated.
Correct.
Obviously retailers, restaurants and so forth. But a lot of business-to-business companies have also been hit hard. So it's a matter of, if you sell now, your TTM is going to probably be down. You're going to have to accept less. If you wait a few months and are able to kind of recover some of that and get your business kind of back growing again, I think you're in a much better spot.
I want to go back to the fundamental. Let's say, John, for someone who have been kind of building the business, like you said, a lot of the wealth is locked into the business. Until they exit, they cannot realize that wealth, right? when is a good time to sell? Like that's a fundamental question. Is it because it's 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, or how much revenue I should hit before I even think about selling? How many employees? Like what's been your experience and what would be your advice?
Yeah. So most of the entrepreneurs that I know of want to sell at the nadir, at the maximum spot, right? When their business is at the top, when, the economy's booming, when interest rates are low, like everything sort of comes together and they're like, that's when I'm going to sell, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs think that, we can time that. The problem is number one, no one has a crystal ball, and COVID has certainly cleared that. Number two, the best time to sell your business is when someone's buying it. I interviewed a guy just after I interviewed you, Dan. I interviewed a guy named Rand Fishkin. Have you ever heard of Rand?
No.
He wrote a great book. It's definitely worth picking up, called Lost and Founder. Okay. He started a company called Moz, and Moz, SEO Moz is software company, helps you do SEO.
Yes.
And Rand built it up to around $5 million in revenue. And he thought, you know what? I'm gonna just keep doubling the size of this business. When he gets a call from Brian Halligan, the guy who started HubSpot.
Yes.
And Halligan says, look, Rand, we love what you built. It's a $5 million company. We want to pay you $25 million for it. So 5 times revenue.
Yes.
Most of which is cash, some HubSpot stock.
Yes.
Fishkin thinks, well, we're on this kind of trajectory. We're booming. We're at 5 million in revenue now. We're expecting to go to 10. Maybe we'll, kind of wait for a little while.
But get more afterwards. Yes.
Yeah. And so he kind of plays hard to get and says, no, we want 40. Halligan's like 40 for a $5 million company. No way. Can't do it. And so they split. And long story short, Fishkin's business starts to go into a tailspin. He personally, as he describes in the book and told me on my show, he went through a period of depression. Ultimately, he left the company. The business, he raised some venture capital instead. They used preferred shares, and ultimately, he was left with just some privately held company shares that may or may not be worth anything one day. And what's kind of an interesting postscript to the story, Dan, is that offer, based on the appreciation of HubSpot stock, would be $100 million today.
Wow. Yes.
So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying we all want to time the business sale for the best possible moment. But the reality is the best time to sell your business is when someone's buying. And when someone calls you up and says, look, we like what you're doing, take that call, because you may never know when the next opportunity will be.
Do you also see that because business is it's different from a stock or different from even a home? Right? It's not like every single day you got someone come by and say, hey, I want to buy your business. You might, in 20 years, only have 1 or 2 people knock on your door and say, hey, I'm interested in looking into buying your business. This doesn't happen a lot. Even if we go out there and search and hunt and knock on doors and say anyone wants to buy, it's not like that.
Yeah, it's a very opaque market, to use sort of an MBA word.
It is.
There's very little activity. It's not like a stock in Ford or Tesla where you can trade it. You know what the value is any day of the night. It's a very opaque market, and there is not a lot of liquidity. And it's one of the reasons that I talk a lot about in The Art of Selling, this idea of trying to create a competitive marketplace for your company, because if you just get stuck in a proprietary deal, which is when you negotiate with one other company, it's a definition of basically getting hosed, because you're negotiating from a position of weakness. So, what I would counsel someone like Rand to do is take the call from Mark Halligan and at the same time see if there's another company that might be interested in acquiring you, and at least create some competitive tension.
Yes. You want a little bit of that walk away power, right? You don't want to be, if they walk away like, oh my God, I'm going to wait another 10 years and I'm not going to see another buyer that walks through the door, right? Even though maybe the second buyer may not be anything, or they may not even go through, but it's good. Hey, I'm talking to so-and-so as well. Let's see who's giving me a better offer, right? That makes sense.
And one of the things I spent a lot of time talking about is the use of a private equity group as a bit of a pawn in a negotiation. When I talk to entrepreneurs, and again, maybe Dan, you've had the same experience, they'll tell me that I want to sell to a strategic. right?
Yes.
And I don't like the idea of a private equity group. Sometimes they want to sell to private equity, but other times it's like, I want a strategic.
Yes.
And so what I counsel them is that's great to have an aspiration, but if you can also be attractive to private equity groups, most private equity groups are sheep. They have the same criteria. They want a business in a unique niche. They want a management team in place. They want a differentiated advantage. They want positive cash flow. Like it's the same stuff. And if you're attractive to one, you're probably attractive to 100.
Yes.
And so what I love to do is make sure that you've got private equity on your list of potential acquirers. And once you tick the box against their criteria for an acquisition, you can often find lots of different guys. And there you're into a real competitive conversation. And again, you've got leverage when you're in a competitive conversation.
Correct. And you never know what cycle that private equity is in. Maybe they need to get money out. Like you just don't know. Maybe you say, hey, we just raised a whole bunch of money. We need to get the money out.
Yeah.
And they don't mind to pay a little bit more because they would rather deploy more capital than not deploying capital, right?
Yeah, for sure. And there's also this kind of hybrid somewhere in between where I refer to them as a strategic hybrid. Basically, they are a private equity company by legal definition.
Yes.
But actually they're doing a roll up. So they're almost acting a little bit more like a strategic. A strategic acquirer usually pays the most for your business because they've got assets that you can that they can leverage.
Could be a bolt on, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And I've got a situation I'm aware of where somebody's rolling up dental practices. And so the more practices they roll up, the more buying power they have.
Correct.
The better margins each practice can make.
Correct.
So it is a private equity group that's backed, but in many ways it's acting almost like a strategic acquirer.
Interesting. What are some of the mistakes that you see like entrepreneurs make or business owners make when they are thinking about selling or when they're actually selling? I think one you've kind of already mentioned, only one buyer. You're not creating kind of competition, right? And what are some of the other mistakes that you see?
Yeah. One of the biggies is answering the question, what do you want for your company? Right.
Yes,
so most acquirers never want to make the first move, right? They've all know the negotiation.
Whoever names the price loses, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we've all seen that, we all know that basic negotiation premise, right?
Yes.
But what a good negotiator, acquirer will do is wine and dine you and romance you and shower you with praise and oftentimes they'll get you into a quiet compromise position. Oftentimes in a negotiation, you'll have your M&A professional with you or your business broker with you, but they'll excuse themselves to go to the bathroom, or you'll have a one-off meeting just with the acquirer, and they'll kind of put their arm around you figuratively or actually and say, like, Dan, what do you want? Like, what's your bottom?
Ballpark, right?
Yeah, just ballpark. What do you need to get, right? And the moment you answer that question, you put a hard ceiling on which you will never sell your business for a penny more than that. And you'll never know what you could have sold your company for had you let the market determine the value. So I would coach any entrepreneur who's going into that process and say, look, when you get that question, you look them in the eyes and say, look, I'm a reasonable guy. I will seriously consider any reasonable offer. And you move on, right? And they say, no, really, what do you want? And you just repeat yourself and say, listen, we're not looking to sell right now, but look, we're entrepreneurs and we will seriously consider a reasonable offer. So let me know what you have in mind.
Yes.
And I think that just keeps the mystery and allows you to kind of hold a little bit of negotiating leverage.
That's very powerful, because this way they may be thinking about there's some value they could add after they acquire you that you may not be aware of that is very valuable, right? Just like HubSpot, I mean, they're probably thinking about there's certain tech that they want that will help them attract more customers. That's why they're willing to pay that $25 million, because it's not worth $25 million. Like logically, right? Logically, right? So, but they're thinking about different things. So you never know. Like that's a great tip. What about sometimes? Do you find the entrepreneurs, let's say it's not super big, like the company's maybe doing a few $1 million a year. Now they're talking to let's say a big company, a giant, right? And I find that sometimes they are very intimidated by, I'm talking to this big company. I don't know what to say. Like so many layers. I'm just me with my little team. Like what advice would you give for entrepreneurs when they're negotiating with, a big company?
Wow. I mean, it's like they put their pants on the same way everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time.
Love that. Yeah.
You know, they have many of the same reasons to buy your business. What I see more often is the aspiration to sell to big companies that's really not realistic. So there's something called the 5 to 20 rule, and it states that the natural acquirer for your business is somewhere between 5 and 20 times the size of your company is today.
Like that.
And the reason is that for you to really move the needle for an acquirer, you can't be so small and them to be so big. Now, there are exceptions, right? We can all point to examples where Google's bought, 5 guys in a garage. Like, so there are definitely exceptions.
For different reasons. Yeah.
That's right. But for, as a rule of thumb, I would think about 5 to 20. So that guy or gal with a, $2-3 million business, that's more likely to be acquired by a private equity company who is going to roll together a few businesses and then go sell to a strategic.
Yes.
And that private equity company is going to ask you to roll some equity into a new entity. So they might ask you to, sell 60%, 70%, 80% of your equity, and then participate in them on the next round when they go to sell. Yes. And that's a very common thing. So if you think your natural acquirer is pull a big company out of Procter & Gamble, right? And you're a $2 million company, that may be possible, but it's much more likely that you would get acquired by a $20 million company who had aspirations itself of selling to Procter & Gamble down the road.
They want to sell up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That makes sense. It's interesting because I think your new book, The Art of Selling Your Business, it's interesting title because I think what you've done is more than an art. You kind of boil it down to a science, which I find it very fascinating because to me, it's because everything that you do is very systematic, like your work, the way you think about things. Before the show, Joy and I, we were talking, it's almost the 3 books that you've done. First is Built to Sell, right? That's how to start the business. And then you have the Automatic Customer, which is more about business model and how to scale recurring revenue. And then now the new book, The Art of Selling a Business, that's on exit. It's kind of like a trilogy, right? Like whatever you need, right? Now, however, I do recommend if even we are thinking about selling a business or not thinking about a business, you can read John's book from a buyer perspective as well. If you're thinking about buying a business, what kind of business you should buy, they should have some of these systems in place, the brands, like you can use it multiple ways. I think it's just powerful from my perspective.
Yeah, we have a lot of. It's not what we think about, but I know we have a lot of readers who kind of say, "I want to build a business that's not built. I want to buy a business that's not built to sell." Right?
Yes.
I want to buy an owner-dependent business that's got terrible cash flow, and I want to buy it for pennies on the dollar.
Yes.
And then apply the built to sell kind of methodology and automatic customer. So. I'm aware of that. It's not what we think about, but I do know that that's something that some folks do.
Yes. Talk to us about an earnout. For those who don't know what an earnout is, and as a seller, how do I avoid that?
Yeah, great question. So an earnout is when, here's what happens. Oftentimes there's a gap between what an owner wants for a company and what a buyer wants to buy it for.
Just a little one.
Just a little one. And one of the ways to bridge the gap is to say, okay, the acquirer might say, okay, I can see myself paying that much for your company, but you got to share in some of the risk. And so what we're going to do is pay you a certain amount up front, and then we're going to give you a second tranche of money, a bonus, if you will, although it's not treated as a bonus, if you sell your business, if you achieve certain goals in the future.
Yes.
And oftentimes service companies that are dependent on the owner have to get stuck in an earnout. And I say stuck in an earnout, Dan, because as you've seen, and I'm sure a lot of your work, earnouts are perfectly reasonable on paper and oftentimes blow up in reality because you don't control, as the division of another company, your ability to hit your earnout, right? So a good lawyer will paper your earnout to try to, contemplate all sorts of scenarios. But in the reality, if Procter & Gamble or some, deep-pocketed private equity company buys you, you have very little control, right?
Yes.
And so the trick to making sure you don't get stuck in an earnout or you minimize the proportion of your
You get
wealth
most of
or
the money
proceeds
upfront and not based on performance.
Yeah, the trick is, I mean, there's a few secrets. One is to make sure you have negotiating leverage, so you've got multiple offers, so that you can say, look, I need 80% upfront or 90%. Number two is make sure the business is not reliant on you personally, because the earnout is often used when the owner is at the epicenter of the business still. So if you can scrape yourself and pull yourself out of the business through instituting processes and so forth, you're going to find that they're less hung up on keeping you around. Most companies, especially service companies, small companies, will have some earnout, but the trick is to just kind of minimize your exposure to it, minimize the length, and ultimately the amount of your business that's at risk in an earnout.
Got it. So when a buyer is looking to buy the business, they are very much looking for what is the potential earning ability of the business. That's what they're actually buying. It's a future earning potential. So if you are the main revenue driver and you are the main rainmaker, they look at that as like, well, without you here, the revenue is gonna drop. So if you want to avoid that earnout, like kind of the whole situation, if you can demonstrate, hey, you know what? Actually, I'm not the one that's generating the revenue. It's a team, it's my system, it's my processes, all these things are generating. I'm just kind of, without me, the thing is gonna be okay, right? If you can demonstrate that, you can convince them, then you can avoid that. But sometimes, like, John, you talk about, like, sometimes you cannot avoid, but at least minimize it. Not, hey, get 50% upfront and then 50% earnout. That's a very bad. It's almost like, John, would you say when you have an earnout situation, you almost have to be mentally prepared you may not get that money?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. You're right. I mean, the safest way to do it is to ensure that the earnout money is kind of gravy.
Yes, I see the kick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if short of that, tying your earnout to something you absolutely control. So top line revenue is going to be better than bottom line profit, right? Bottom line profit, there's all kinds of things an acquirer can do to your P&L in order to change the profitability. So I'd rather an earnout tied to top line profit than bottom line. I just did an interview on my podcast with a guy who tied it to the release of a product.
Oh, okay.
And he knew that he could release, it was a software product. He knew the code was basically 90% baked. Like, he knew it was doable, and he had control of it, not the acquirer. So for him, he was happy to sign up to an earnout that tied his second tranche of proceeds.
More like a milestone, not like a revenue number.
That's right.
That's smart.
Exactly. It could be, I've seen earnouts tied to the retention of a single client, as an example.
An account.
The retention of a key employee is pretty rare, but I've seen it. It's much more common for them to try to make it tied to your profitability. And if you think about it, Dan, it almost always puts you in conflict with the acquirer, right?
Yes.
So if the acquirer's goal is to integrate your business into theirs, they should be looking for those synergies, those ways the businesses go together. If you're on an earnout, you're going to be motivated to stay away from the mothership, right? And basically carve out your turf and continue to protect the
interest.
It creates this kind of tension. And it can work, but it can also backfire spectacularly.
That makes sense. What about, let's say I have a business, I want to sell. If I just wait, I'll be waiting for a long time for someone to knock on my door. How do I approach potential buyers without coming across like needy or desperate? Like, you knock on someone, so, hey, you want to buy my business? Like, no, right? Even though they might want to, but it's not very effective. Like, what are some of the strategies in terms of like outbound that we could do?
Yeah, two things. Number one, a huge proportion of businesses that sell, and I don't know the number off the top of my head, but it's a big chunk, sell to companies they already do business with, oftentimes through a partnership.
Got it.
It's very likely that you already know the most natural acquirers for your company because you have a pre-existing partnership. It doesn't have to be a competitor, but it could be someone who supplies you something, a strategic partner that you're already aligned with. Very common.
Right, your vertical integration, perhaps. right?
Vertical integration, exactly. So key customer, key supplier, key partner, et cetera. So look, the word partner can be an effective way to start that conversation. So instead of saying like, would you like to buy my business? You could literally, approach a company and say, look, I think we're in the same, industry. I think there's a lot of synergies that we could take advantage of together. Let's explore a partnership. That's not saying I'm for sale. It's talking about a partnership. And oftentimes that will ultimately lead to an acquisition conversation, but you don't have to undermine your negotiating leverage by using the word acquisition. The second thing I would say, Dan, is that in many ways, how do you generate leads is a who, not how question. And that's a Dan Sullivan expression. He's just written a book. The founder of the Strategic Coach has written a book called Who, Not How. And what he's saying is that there are some questions it's better to find somebody as opposed to trying to figure it out yourself. And so for that, and so what I mean to say in a long-winded way is that really when you sell your business, you want an intermediary, an M&A professional. Typically, if your company is more than say $3 or $4 million in value, a business broker, if it's below that, their job is to find the acquirers. That's their job, is to create competitive tension. And so, you could really knock your head against the wall trying to find acquirers and or you could hire someone who does it for a living. It's not my profession. That's not what I do. I'm not saying that in a self-serving way, but I do believe most business owners are going to be best served by hiring an M&A professional.
Yes. It's kind of like the way I describe, think about you are selling your home, right? You could put a sign out there and say, for sale by owner, but chances are you could sell it faster for more money if you tap into sign a deal with a real estate agent, right? They would have contacts and network and things that you won't have access to, right? And they and it's also better to have a third party kind of negotiating back and forth, right?
You're absolutely right. It takes some of the sting away from the negotiation. It can remove some of the emotional nature of the negotiation for sure. They can act like that foil. And you're right. Most good M&A firms have pre-existing relationships with acquirers, in particular private equity groups. Correct. And just like good real estate agents have access to the MLS platform, they've got access to buyers. Same thing is true as M&A professionals, right? So they have their list of 50 private equity companies that they know which kind of deals they're looking for, and they're on speed dial. They can reach out. So again, I think an M&A professional more than pays for their commission based on creating competitive tension and running a structured, successful process.
Yes. I don't think that you're trying to save a few percentage and say, oh, I'm going to do it on my own. At the end, it may not be the results may not be good. And also, I think when you have the third party, because think about it, if you're a business owner, you've been in the business for like 10, 5, 15, 20 years. There's a lot of emotions attached to the business, right? So someone comes in, maybe a buyer that's not intentional, but if they question certain things, it's very easy to get defensive. Like it's like, this is my home, I've been living for 20 years. Someone comes in, I don't like the kitchen. The wife is like, what do you mean you don't like the kitchen? I grew up here. My wife cooks here. It's perfect, right? It's all this stuff. Right? Think about that, a home, but multiply that by 10 for a business. You got employees, you've got space, you've got contract, you name it, right? It's so very easy. It's very easy not to, I don't like the color of the wall. What's wrong with this? It's perfect.
Right. Yeah.
I just don't like it. Right? Yeah. And then then screw you, then I'm not going to sell to you. No, you don't want that at all. Yeah. Like why? Like real estate agent, when they take a potential buyer to tour, kind of look at a home, usually ask the seller to not
leave.
There's a reason for it, right?
That's so true.
It's the same thing here. What about in terms of, okay, let's say I'm talking to some people now. I'm talking to some potential buyers.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of selling, entertaining the idea. How do I communicate that to my employees and team without like scaring them?
Yeah, well, you don't, basically.
Shut up, you don't.
Yeah, earlier you were saying, like, what are the big mistakes? One of the biggest mistakes is telling your employees that you're selling prior to the money getting wired into your account. So what happens generally is that owners feel a tremendous sense of guilt, right?
Yes.
Their employees they've grown up with, they've broken bread together, they've kind of gone through the war together, and they feel the sense of real loyalty to their owners. And they feel kind of like a cheating spouse when they're walking around the office or, the factory floor, knowing that, suddenly they're going to, drop this big news on them. And so they'll sign a letter of intent, which, as you know, Dan, is sort of like it's a preliminary, generally non-binding agreement to acquire a company, but it's non-binding.
Yes.
And somewhere between a third and a half of all LOIs blow up during diligence, right? They don't happen because all kinds of things go wrong during diligence.
You look under the hood, not quite exactly what it is.
Not what you thought it was. And so business owners oftentimes think an LOI is much more serious than it is.
Yes.
And they take the LOI as basically like a commitment to buy.
Agreement,
And then they choose to share with their employees, hey, we got this plan to sell, or they choose to sell and tell their spouse or key customer.
Yes.
And of course, the problem is everyone you share that information with, number one, the chances that it gets out increase.
It's 100%. Let's just talk about, even say it's confidential, don't share with anybody, but tomorrow everybody knows.
Boom, it's everywhere, right? Which can derail your business. Most importantly though, it undermines your negotiating leverage.
Yes.
Let's imagine for a second that you tell your spouse that you've just signed an agreement to sell your business for $10 million.
Yes.
What does your spouse do?
Yeah.
Holy crap! We're going to be able to buy that house, buy that cottage,
let's take that vacation. Let me talk to Susan.
Right?
Yes.
What are you going to feel like if you walk in a week later and say, "Oh yeah, remember that honey that it's not going to happen."
Fell through. Yeah.
Right. So you're emotionally committed to it. You also, in your own mind, buy stuff. If you tell your employees, the acquirer might ask to talk to the employees. Yes. The acquirer may say, "You know what? Maybe Dan, we're not going to buy your business. We're just going to." Maybe just attract or recruit some of your key employees.
Yes.
Again, it can really unravel. So my suggestion is you don't tell your employees until the check clears your account.
And like sometimes if you're thinking about what about they kind of have to look under the hood. What do I say to what I would say, you don't tell them, hey, these are potential buyers. Yeah. It's like, I like to tell these are potential joint venture partners. Yeah. And we might collaborate. We're thinking about, synergy.
You can also refer to them as investors.
Yes. Right. So it's very non-threatening because you got to keep in mind as a business owner, your employees, different mentality. They're thinking, I'm going to get fired. Do I still have a job? Yeah. What's going to happen? Right. They have a lot of things they are worrying about. Like you don't want to bring those things into the whole negotiation. It does not help you.
Yeah. And I should be clear, Dan, earlier I said, don't tell your employees. Yeah. I think you need to break them into two categories. I think you have the majority of your employees, your rank and file employees who you would not tell. Yes. But then there are one or two, maybe three management level people. Maybe your head of finance.
Yes.
If you've got a separate sales and marketing person, you will have to bring them into the fold because when you show up deep into a negotiation in the diligence phase and it's just you, they're going to be like, well, what if you get hit by a bus? So they're going to need to see a management team. And so what I would say is if there are two or three people you really need on board, first of all, make sure you get their agreement to confidentiality. Number two, put some skin in the game for them. So ensure that they get some bonus, some sort of offer from you to help you consummate a sale. And that will ensure that they will be on your team as well as hopefully keep your confidence because it only serves them to make sure that the deal gets done.
What about the potential buyer insist in terms of talking to employees? Like, let's say after letter of intent, now we're in due diligence and say, let me interview some of the employees. How do, as the seller, the business owner, how do I explain that to, let's say, more my junior employees?
Yeah, look, I think your idea earlier saying, we're considering a joint venture partnership. We're considering these guys as investors. Those are all fine. Yes. What I would though recommend is what's called staged diligence or gated diligence. And what that means is that, when an acquirer goes to do their due diligence, they're investing money in that. Right.
Yes.
And they've got to hire an accounting firm to do a quality of earnings. They've got to hire a legal team to do up the share purchase agreement. The more diligence they do, the more sunk money they have in the deal. And so talking to your customers and talking to your employees are two of the most delicate things that they will ask to do. Now, you may get away with saying, no, I'm not going to let you talk to my customers or my employees, but you may have to. What I would suggest you do is have a series of gates and say that, the final gate is you talk to my, 3 best customers. Yeah. But before you get there, we've got to have a draft share purchase agreement. We've got to have a draft employment agreement. We've got to have a draft reps and warranties agreement, all these things that they're going to have to invest money in. And once they're 50, 100 grand into legals to get the deal done, the acquirer, you can feel pretty confident that they're serious about it.
Yes.
Whereas in the book, I give you, there's actually an example where a private equity group went out and basically signed LOIs with 90 different companies. And the only reason they were signing the LOI, they had no intention of actually acquiring 90 companies. They wanted to talk to the managers because they wanted to recruit them as employees. So of the 90 companies they spoke with, I think they ended up buying 2.
Yes.
And they also went to 88 of the companies and acquired their C-level talent.
Yes.
So gated diligence can ensure that you're not going to start giving away information that people are just fishing for. They're really serious about buying your company before you start letting in that close.
That's such a great tip, because I think for most entrepreneurs, they don't have a whole lot of experience selling their businesses. This may be the first time ever they even consider. So you're walking into a scenario where you're dealing with, if it's a private equity group or a company that's potentially pretty savvy and sophisticated, right? And I think we need to be more cautious, I think, for all the business owners, that they are bad people, right? Like, I think it's interesting, John, because I notice in the finance world, you just have those people. Like, they are more the predators type. They are more like, you will not think someone would buy a business and fire 80% employees. You better believe it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like there are things that they would do to kind of screw you, and they would have no hesitation about it. So it's up to us to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah, they're mercenaries. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're all bad people.
Yeah. Not all.
No, there's some, for sure, there's some bad actors. But what I would say is it's important to understand their motivation. So here's the private equity game. Yes. They generally raise money from investors, right? And the reason that investor is entrusting the money with a private equity group is because they want a return on it. Yeah. The only way they get a return on that money invested is if they buy your company for as little as they possibly can and sell it 5-7 years down the road for as much as they can.
Yes.
The way they do that is not only buying your business for a low valuation comparatively, they also use a lot of debt. And the problem with debt is that it has to be repaid. And so you have a highly leveraged company. So they buy your business. They use a lot of debt to do that. They've got to return the debt and pay off the debt while you're continuing to grow the business.
Yes.
So the only way they do that is to really professionalize your company, right?
That's a nice way of saying
throw out all the stuff you used to do.
That's correct.
And bring in all these great policies. And for an entrepreneur, that can be like open heart surgery without the anesthetic, right? It's like your home analogy earlier. Like, what do you mean? My wife has cooked dinner for my family 20 years in this kitchen. What do you mean?
No, we're gonna take it out. We're gonna rack this. We're gonna all this. Yeah,
that's what it feels like for entrepreneurs who are acquired in many cases by a private equity group, because private equity group is going, great, damn, I love your business, but we're going to change this, and you're like, what? And it can be really difficult. So I think selling to a private equity group is perfectly reasonable. There's lots of advantages to it. It's just important to know what their motivation is. Buy low, sell high, use a lot of leverage. And if you kind of know their game, you can use that to your advantage.
Correct. And I think it's we don't want to scare you of, this sounds so horrible that I should never sell. I'm not going to let them come into our business. It's better to know that what you're dealing with, right? That's why I think John's new book, The Art of Selling a Business, is great, because we know for most entrepreneurs, that's like a big payday, but also that's kind of when you have sold a company, that's when you know you're a good entrepreneur. Yeah. Because you would not have even gotten there if you don't build systems and you don't have leadership, you haven't built culture, all these things, right? It's like a badge of honor. Yep, I've sold my company. If you sold it multiple times, that's, you're exceptional as an entrepreneur. But knowing going in, you're going to deal with some of these things. You're going to deal with legal. You're going to deal with some pretty savvy buyers, investors. And some people might take advantage. You might make some mistakes. They might screw you a couple of times. It's all part of the game. That's what we're saying, right? We're all part of the game. But if you do make it happen, right, it would be like, John, when you first sold your business, what was that like? The thrill?
Oh, I mean, yeah, like I think I would characterize it as just freedom, right? Like I didn't go buy anything terribly, fancy, but there is that sense, I think, and you've seen this in your own life, where you sell that business and all of a sudden you don't have to work in like every, you can choose to what you want to do. And that's an incredibly luxurious position to be in. And it's something that I think a lot of people aspire for. And it's really freedom. It's the freedom to decide what you want to do and not feel beholden to, because, a lot of small business owners, they grow up selling a few things to a lot of customers, right? Yes. Excuse me, selling a lot of customers a few things. Yes. They become very dependent on these customers who sort of tell them what to do, in effect, and they kind of start business for that sense of freedom and being able to run their own show, and they end up becoming
working for everybody else, right?
Customers who kind of tell them jump, and you have to ask how high. And so, I think most entrepreneurs, there's one sort of common denominator. It's this real desire for freedom, right? Yes. And I think selling your business gives you the ultimate in freedom. And I think that's why I don't fault owners for wanting to sell. I know there's two schools of thought on this. I was interviewed on a podcast a while ago, and the guy started off by saying, "Oh, right, Warlow, you're the douchebag who wrote Built to Sell."
What the hell?
And I thought, what? And he went on to kind of say, only the kind of most, most greedy entrepreneurs build to sell, and, blah, blah, blah. And I was really on my back foot. I thought, wow, like, how can you think this way? But for a lot of people, there's still this notion that selling a company is somehow kind of dirty and something you should never do.
It's like almost selling out. It's like almost selling.
That's right.
It's like you sell out. Right? If you love your company, you're passionate, you shouldn't do that. Like, why do you do that? You sell your employees, sell your customers. It has a lot of that negative, association with the whole idea.
I agree 100%. Yet, I agree that perception exists. I disagree 100% in the sense that I think it's so wrong. I think, like you, selling your business is like touching home plate, right?
That's exactly it.
It's the final stage, and I think it is the route to freedom.
And your philosophy is also in the books that you wrote. Is even though you may not sell the business, you would be in way better position if you're building it as if you're going to sell it. That's really what you're talking about, what your work is about, because that makes you think, okay, how do I not be so dependent? How do I have process in place? How do I productize? How do I create recurring revenue? Everything you talked about. If you're not going to sell it, you're going to run a better business, period.
Yeah, so 100%.
So that frame of mind doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it never hurts, right? You're in the catbird seat. You could bring in a manager, make it a passive income company. Correct. You could sell half of it to a private equity group and just put the money in your jeans and carry some. Correct. You could sell it to a strategic. Like, it gives you like the entire breadth of options. And that's why I think it's the way to run a company, because that way you're in control. You get to decide what you want to do with it.
And if you don't have that kind of mindset, you don't think like kind of built to sell, you're not going to think it. You're going to think you're just going to think about money. You're going to think about how to bring revenue in. And I always talked about, like, even in my work, the difference between a money maker and a business. You might have a money maker, but you don't have a business.
Right.
It makes money. It provides for a family. You make a good income. It's all nice, but no one will ever buy it. You're always tied to it. You can't really scale. And if anything happens to you, your business is done.
Yeah.
So then, like, if you're going to build a business, why not just build a business? Why just a moneymaker, right? And a lot of times, just like what John talks about, it's a shift in mindset. If you don't think about selling, you will never sell. If you think about it, you don't have to sell, but everything would be more efficient. I think that's the message for today, really.
I love the way you think about this. I think, one way to make decisions in your company as you're growing it is the ultimate aspiration is like, let me back up. As a parent, I think my goal as a parent is to bring kids into the world who become fully functioning adults. They're happy. They're independent. As much as
you don't want them living in a basement for like until they're 35.
Everybody feels the same way, right? We want our kids to thrive and kind of succeed in their own terms. Yeah. And I think if you run your company with that as your ultimate aspiration, that you're trying to create a company like you would a child that will go through adolescence and eventually launch into the world and can subsist without you and exist. I mean, that's the ultimate legacy is that you've created something that can succeed without you, that will go on. Correct. Years, generations to come propagate what you wanted to instill in them. And I think that's the ultimate in running a company, is to be the parent of a business that can one day live without you. And it's, it's kind of a kumbaya, kind of airy-fairy idea, but I think it can help you make decisions. Like, is this when you think about launching that new product, starting that new factory, bringing on that new employee, whatever it happens to be, is this going to make my business more or less dependent on me?
Yes.
And if the answer is more, I would think twice about that decision, because I think while it may be a moneymaker, as you described, it may not be getting you closer to where you want to go.
Because it costs you time and freedom, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about being more strategic, right? Awesome. John, for my listeners, entrepreneurs, if they want to find out more about your work, of course, they can go to Amazon to get your new book, or go to Built to Sell to get your new book. What are some of the resources you would recommend for someone who maybe is new to your work? Where's a good starting point?
Yeah, I would go to builttosell.com and sign up to receive the weekly podcast.
Yes.
I interview a different entrepreneur every week.
Podcast. Yes.
It's how we met, Dan. Yes. And I basically talk to entrepreneurs who have recently sold their company. Yeah. And I ask them, what do you wish you'd known? What do you if you had a do-over, what would you do differently?
Yes.
And that's, it's free. And so it's on iTunes or Stitcher. You just go to builttosell.com and opt in, and you'll get a fresh new episode once a week. And if these kind of case studies and stories get you thinking, you'll find that to be, I think, a pretty good resource.
Yes, and get the 3 books: Built to Sell, Automatic Customer, right? The Art of Selling a Business. And they're short books. They're not like, it's short. You can finish probably in a couple of days. I mean, that's why it's so awesome. And it's very practical. Like, there's no, you read the first chapter, like, oh, wow, there's something I can do. Step 2, there's something I can do. This is not like a long drag, like, story like that. Like, that's, like, I love the book. I've read, I don't know how many times. Like, I got like second, third copy because I had to highlight and talk to you. So I have like multiple versions in my library. So I know I bought at least like quite a few times already.
It's very kind of you, Dan. I appreciate it.
No, really, really, John, you do amazing work. So Built to Sell. Read all the 3 books, and of course, I know John has other more advanced type resources and programs you can look into as well. John, happy to have you. It's awesome to talk to you and connect again. Next time when I have another exit, I'll be on the show again.
Thanks, Dan. It was a pleasure.
Pleasure. Take care.